You're listening to The Green Flag with your hosts, Lukas Wacker and Kyle Cushman.
Let's go California dreaming, everybody. It's the farewell tour for Auto Club Speedway this weekend with the Xfinity and Cup Series in action there on the West Coast to really get the season underway for the NASCAR Cup Series and Xfinity Series after a pretty wild Daytona. We got a surprise winner, and then the other two were repeats of last year. So that was kind of interesting, but definitely an interesting Daytona 500. Had mostly two wide racing throughout the entire race, but it seemed like it was difficult to form that third lane with this generation of car. So maybe there's some tweaking to be done with the Super Speedway package, but all in all, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is now a Daytona 500 champion. We've got, we'll give our quick thoughts on that, and then we'll just jump right into our draft for Auto Club Speedway, since it was a very light news week, if anything really dropped of note. So before we get into all of that, in a bittersweet ending to Auto Club Speedway's journey and the Cup Series calendar this weekend, how are you doing today, Kyle?
Doing good, yeah. Excited to get into the real meat and potatoes of the NASCAR calendar, where it's always fun to have that Super Bowl-esque opening of the season. It's so huge, having the huge viewership numbers, massive crowd, the big trophy everybody's going for, the crown jewel of all crown jewels, but it doesn't tell you really anything about the season on hand. It's the second week of the season. Even when you look to the Clash and how there's no track type like it that small on the calendar, and then you go super speedway racing, so you don't get much more information there. You got to wait until the second week of the season, regardless of whatever track it is. Of course, the last couple of years being Auto Club. And I'm looking forward to see what we're going to get out of it. Of course, last year with nobody knowing what to expect with the new car going into that race and some of the unexpected things we saw out of that race, I'm really curious to see how much of a different race we get this weekend, how different it is, if it's same at all, if we see the same guys kind of rise to the top, all that kind of stuff, which will shape us up for what's kind of on hand for the rest of the year.
Exactly. And before we get into Auto Club, Daytona, it was an interesting weekend. I was very much on the edge of my seat, as you can imagine, in those closing laps, thinking that maybe it was coming home for the first time for Kyle Busch, but
it's never coming home.
I digress. That Daniel Suarez had a single car spin off of turn 4, and that ultimately really cost him having the chance of having single file near the end.
Cost him. Team orders cost.
Okay, let's have the debate then, or have the conversation, because I'm kind of curious on what. I feel like it's almost a no-win situation that they were put in. I don't. Okay, why do you disagree on the restart decision on what lines you pick?
Well,
I think it was personally the wrong decision.
About it
but
in the intro,
I can understand
all day long. We saw there be 2 lines and nobody could form a third line. So why wouldn't you control both lines with a 2-lap shootout with your cars, have one of them pushed by a Chevy and kind of see what you get, instead of choking up the bottom lane, letting the guys on the outside get the run, which always happens when you do the teammate restart like that, especially with this generation of car. And then we saw what happened on the backstretch where you choke up the bottom lane and eventually somebody gets spun out.
I think what they should have done is lined up nose to tail from the beginning on the bottom. In my opinion, I think that would have been the best way.
My point is, like, we saw 2-lane racing the entire time. Why would you give up control?
I feel like in the situation that they were in, though, when you look at the cars that were behind that outside line, I think they could have split to the top and just left whoever was on the outside line there, whether it was Kyle or Austin Dillon on the backstretch with the run that they had, and then Dillon or Kyle Busch goes in the sucker hole backwards. I think that was probably in their mind to think that they were going to get split by the cars behind. And that makes a lot of sense, because why wouldn't you? I think if you line up nose to tail there, you give yourself the best option of having someone you can absolutely trust is not going to leave your back bumper there for the final 2 laps. But then you can kind of let the top line do whatever it wants in a way. Like, you just kind of go mano-a-mano and see what happens. I think there was a greater risk in the guy on the outside getting screwed over by the people behind him if they did restart side by side, and they kept it that way. No teammate restart. I think teammate restart was definitely the wrong way to go. I know that's hindsight's 2020, but
I don't think it really is. Pretty clearly from when it happened, it was not the greatest decision.
I was listening obviously to the scanner of Kyle's radio just to hear what his thought process was. That was Kyle's, recommended, or that's the one he pushed for, was like, that's the one he suggested, that option being the teammate restart. He thought that would work well. And then Austin Dillon all thought the other way. He thought, put them like how you think it would be best, 2 cars side by side, and then let them race it out and block both lanes.
Yeah, I think regardless, what they did is the wrong decision. Either like you suggested, either start them from the get-go and have them push from the start, or you try to block or you just lead both lanes and kind of see how your cards play out, especially because with the way that Byron lined up, you were going to have one push by a Chevy at the very least. And for me, I would have taken the chances of leading the outside line and either have them push you, or if they try to put you in a sucker hole, hope that they get stalled out when they toss it 3 wide and have somebody coming behind you. So I think those were the two. I think those were the two like legitimate options. But what they did is, I think, not adjusting to the situation you have on hand, where you can pick the lanes, which is something that you couldn't do before.
Crazy to think how much the choose cone really dictated a lot of.
I don't think it's crazy at all. Like, that's why they didn't want to do it before, because it would dictate so much.
Yeah. I mean, if you didn't have the choose cone rule there, obviously Kyle could pick whatever line he's in, and then Dillon goes to the opposite. And that's what they've got. He can't line up behind him in the third row.
If we don't have the choose cone, we have the exact same thing happen. One chooses one lane, the other chooses the other, which is what happens
leaders.
For the
then
choose.
When you look at the pushes behind you, you can kind of help dictate
but
who's
like that
maybe
doesn't,
that third car
that doesn't
line.
impact at all what happened, because what happened off of the start is they do the teammate restart, the one pulls down, and then they go. That's what they did in this. That's what they did in the circumstance. That's what happened in previous years without the choose cone on super speedways. And my point is, they didn't adjust to what they had on hand. They were, whether it was Kyle Busch making the decision, whether it was other people making the decision, I have no clue. Whoever's executive decision it was is somebody that wasn't accounting for the rule changes, in my opinion. Obviously, they know they have the option to. Yeah. But in my opinion, doing that teammate restart is just so detrimental to the momentum of the inside line. And we saw it coming out at a turn 2, where it was just so choked up on the inside because the momentum got stalled out. And then you're just trying to push extra hard to make up that momentum, and then it's game over.
I think when, especially for the cars behind them on the outside line, knowing that they're going to be doing a teammate restart based on how they lined up in the lane decision, it gave them a much better chance of getting a strong push together, knowing that they were going to have open space in front of them after Kyle dropped down in front of Dillon. Like, they can go push like hell and give themselves the run that they did off of turn 2. And Stenhouse got a great shove from behind by Larson and capitalized and went to the inside of Logano. Like, it was just as simple as that. And that's unfortunate, obviously, if you're a Kyle Busch fan or an RCR fan, and how it all turned out. But I ultimately think that they made the wrong decision. When I was listening to it, I'm like, I don't know if I would 100% do that. And then obviously looking at it now, it was proven to be right. So I can understand both sides of it on which way you think would have been best.
An element of it is the hindsight 2020 stuff. Yeah. But I think overall, just with the rule change to have the choose cone, the longer restart zone as well, which I think is an underrated factor of the teammate restart, and stalling it out even more, things like that. I think it was just something where in the future, especially now that you've seen it play out and how poorly it went with the rule change, just start them nose to tail and 100%. Get that push from the get-go, instead of trying to overcomplicate it with the coming down and trying to time it and all this stuff. It's just overthinking it, basics. Quite frankly. And
that's the pressure of it. Like, that's just the stakes of the Daytona 500. Like, one wrong decision like that.
Well, I think it's less about the stakes in this circumstance and not adjusting to the rule changes. I think it was whoever's executive decision it was is not accounting for the changes you had on hand. And I think we saw it play out like that.
Yeah. So Ricky Stenhouse Jr. ended up capitalizing out of that. And of course he gets to lead the next restart, and leads it all the way back around. Seemed like he could have been in a very vulnerable spot there through the tri-oval on the white flag lap with Larson's kind of run, and then he kind of just got left. And he went into the
too much
hole,
of a run. Yeah.
And Bell didn't go with him. Bell stayed with Stenhouse, and that ultimately was the winning decision, that Bell stayed with Stenhouse there, and then Larson ended up going backwards. The wreck ensues behind. They call the caution, and Stenhouse is in front of Logano when it is called. So Stenhouse is into the playoffs. Our playoff predictions that we just did last week are absolutely
everyone's
out
is.
the window. Yeah, I mean, who had Ricky Stenhouse Jr. winning a race? He was, for a long period there after 17, when he won those 2 races, he was like, okay, everyone's looking out for Stenhouse on the super speedways. Everyone's looking out for him. And then I think the last year and a half or so, I feel like it's shifted because Hamlin won so much on the super speedways. Keselowski and Logano and Blaney are always up there that you almost forget about Stenhouse a little bit in the shuffle. But he has always been a pretty decent super speedway racer when he's not involved in wrecks or causing a wreck, because that can happen from time to time. Everybody does it, but Stenhouse was definitely noticeable on that. But
and that's the key here. Like, yes, he's a good super speedway racer, and yes, we've seen the prowess, and obviously the 2017 season is the big one that stands out.
Yeah,
but like his super speedway results, specifically at Daytona, were not good since he won that race in 2017 at Daytona. He won the regular season, or when the summer race. It wasn't the regular season finale back then. Wasn't that when he had like the 1776 quote or whatever it was? Anyways, he was very patriotic when he won that race.
I forget. Man, I should know that, but I don't remember.
My point being, before last Sunday, that was his last top 10 at Daytona.
Yeah.
He had not finished top 10 period at Daytona since he last won. So I get people, to me, it's a bit revisionist to go, he's Ricky Stenhouse Jr., super speedway guy. We should have known he should have been a guy we were not really over the past few years. He's wrecked out a lot. He hasn't been in the mix at the end. And
100%.
We're talking about a 5.5 year gap to the last time he finished top 10 at this track. Yes, he has the ability to do it. Yes, we've seen it, but we hadn't seen it in so long that I think it's completely fair to drop him out of that conversation when it had been that long since he'd gone out and actually done it and finished a Daytona race, let alone been up in the mix.
Yeah, when you look at who's won the Daytona 500 recently, I think Michael McDowell surpassed him in terms of that conversation just because of how consistent he usually is. Cindric, he looked very strong again on Sunday. Yep. He won last year. I think that you could probably put him ahead of Stenhouse when you look at how well the Fords and the Penske cars always show up with speed and how well the Fords can push, clearly, because that was a huge.
I mean, I agree. I drafted him last week.
Yeah. It was a great week for you in the draft. Terrible one for me.
I wouldn't call it great. It was it was serviceable. I'll say that.
Sure. But then what does that tell you about my picks? Good Lord. But for Stenhouse, I mean, he's locked into the playoffs. We'll see how well they do on speed. I think Mike Kelly, bringing him back as the crew chief, will be an underrated element to that team getting a little bit better this year.
I like Brian Patty. So
I do like Brian Patty too, but I think that Mike, when you find a driver and crew chief combination that have had so much history and have shown results, I think that can definitely help mentally for the driver. And a lot of the game is mental at times,
in terms of
Stenhouse's
results this season. I think winning this early will help his results more than any crew chief change or anything like that. Just because we see so often Stenhouse crash out because he's trying to get more than his car.
Wrecky Spinhouse. I mean, there's a reason that he was called that nickname for. Still could be.
Jack Roush got tired of it too back in the Xfinity days. Taking that pressure off of needing to win a race to get in the playoffs and all that stuff, I think will help his overall results more because he'll be more content to just kind of take what the car gives him. Now we'll see if that actually is what happens. But I think we could see that trickle down effect of having that early win translating potentially to some better results over the course of the season for Stenhouse, just because that pressure to go out and must win isn't really there anymore. Yeah.
Do you find it surprising at all that the last 3 years have been surprise winners? I mean, McDowell, Cindric, now Stenhouse, like in the NASCAR's biggest race, you've got some teams or drivers that are, I mean, Cindric was less experienced. Cindric is a good driver. I think it's harder to put him into that category, but still a surprise nonetheless when you look at the names that were up at the front for all 3 of those races in the later stages. I mean, 2021 One was the Penske guys wrecking themselves. And then last year was Blaney playing the good teammate role. He could have passed him, but did he? I mean,
he tried to.
They could have. He could have
if there wasn't
gone
a wall
earlier,
there.
but he stayed loyal to his teammate for a long time. And then this year, I mean, Stenhouse doesn't have any quote unquote teammates. He has manufacturer teammates, but he
literally doesn't have any teammates.
But he doesn't have any car teammates from the organization of JTG. So, like, what do you make of that? Like, I don't know if there's really any definitive like answer to say for that, but it's a observation nonetheless of these underdogs kind of performing in NASCAR's biggest event. And is it a good thing or a bad thing, or what is your take on it?
What I'd say, well, for starters, to say that it's not a surprise is an oxymoron, because either they're surprise drivers winning or not. So it's one or the two. It can't be surprise drivers and I'm not surprised, or one of the two. But we know with super speedway racing, this is why people love it, because it's an equalizer where drivers who are either specifically skilled at this kind of racing or with smaller teams can go out and have legitimate chances to win. And obviously Penske isn't a small team, but an inexperienced driver going out and winning, or a small team like Front Row or a small team like JTG have a legitimate shot to go out and win these races. And just as much as we talk about guys who are specifically skilled at road courses being guys that you try to bring into smaller teams to win, the same can be said for super speedways and having those guys. And you look at McDowell at Front Row and how strong he's been in his career, specifically at Daytona, and obviously having that win. Ricky Stenhouse Jr., only all of his Cup Series wins have been on super speedways. And before this year, it only been in 2017 as well. So it's surprising, yes, in terms of the actual names themselves. But this is why people love super speedway racing. Yes, there are some people that love it just because there's the big crashes and blah, blah, blah. But the pure racing fan loves this kind of race because anyone can go out and win it. It's a legitimate equalizer. And that's what we've seen in recent years. In terms of it being good or bad for the sport, I certainly don't think it's bad per se. It's not ideal in terms of having your biggest race with the biggest audience not necessarily translating to the star drivers winning it. I think it's a lot easier for NASCAR to send a Daytona 500 winner to a late night show or talk shows or whatever. If it's a Chase Elliott, if it's a Denny Hamlin, if it's one of these drivers from the big name teams, you don't get that same kind of media exposure per se. If it's a Michael McDowell winning, if it's a Ricky Stenhouse Jr., that kind of stuff. It's not even just the recognizability. It's the fact that you try to market this person and then the next week they're running 25th. It doesn't really translate to long-term success in your media strategy. It's a lot better for NASCAR if they can put media power behind a Chase Elliott winning the Daytona 500, because he wins the Daytona 500. He goes on this show. He goes on that show. People are like, oh, I want to go check out this NASCAR race. I want to see this guy. I'm intrigued by it. And then you watch him all day be in the top 10, the top 5, potentially winning a race. It's a lot different when it's a guy, it's an underdog that goes out, wins the Daytona 500. You have that great story, but it doesn't really lend itself to that long-term maybe viewer draw. And maybe that's something that's overrated at this point. But I'd say that overall, it's certainly not bad to have underdog winners. It's why people love super speedway racing.
I agree. I think that you said it right there with like, it's not ideal on having the lesser known
based on your perspective
drivers.
From a NASCAR perspective, it's not ideal. From a fan perspective, I think it's awesome.
Yeah. I think you have a little bit of a better speaking to this because you're unbiased. You watch the races and, you just enjoy it as a fan.
Biases. Well, everyone has biases. I don't have a specific driver that I cheer for. And obviously that changes how I watch down. I feel like
every race though, or, something like that. Right. But for me, I mean, that sucked last Sunday. Like it was horrible to watch. But for you, I mean, like, wow, that was quite the entertaining finish. Like see the dynamics on how they screwed it up or like all that kind of stuff. But if you are like a fan of Joey Logano, I mean, like you're like, oh my God, like you're so close, just mere inches, feet from, if the caution time's right, like all of those heartbreaks as a fan, you can feel that if you have a leniency or something like that towards a specific driver or team or manufacturer, whatever. But if you are a fan of the sport and go into each race open-minded, I think it totally opens up to these kinds of surprise winners being much more acceptable in those people's eyes. But for me, I'm like, damn, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. just won the Daytona 500 and Kyle Busch has not won it yet. Like, I mean, it just like the sheer shock value of that statement is crazy to think about, but I'm very happy for Stenhouse because, I mean, any driver who wins the Daytona 500 deserves a lot of praise because a lot of it can be luck, but you have to have skill in that race as well. To avoid the wrecks, know your timing. I mean, we saw the green flag pit stops there at the end, the final one, how crucial that turned out to be in terms of the positioning for that final run there, where it got so stretched out with the single car kind of line. RCR pulls past RFK, and then it seemed like it was going to be quite the dogfight there in the final 3 laps with about 10 cars in that front pack that were going to settle it. And unfortunately, Suarez spun because I think it would have been really fun to see that play out as well.
I would have much rather seen that play out. Yes.
100%. So, I mean, there's been a debate a little bit this week on social media. Do you think that NASCAR should look at keeping the race length to 500 miles, 200 laps, and then ends it under caution? Are you okay with that? Because I feel like a lot of that conversation came about because of who won the race. I think if Kyle Busch wins the race or somebody a little bit more well-known, like, I don't think that is really brought up. I think
the conversation came up because Kyle Busch said it over the radio.
Fair enough. Like, but I feel like it hasn't been a topic of conversation really for a long time, or at least not on social media or talked about in the media or anything like that. It seems like it was brought up because he made that statement. And do you have a preference on that? Like, do you think that it should, for those kind of crown jewel events where it's like the 500 or the 600, like, should we have overtime or should we stick to the designated length that we go in there, and whatever happens in the final couple of laps, if there's a caution, it ends under caution, then that's it? Like, what are your thoughts? Because I'll share mine afterwards, but
the way I see it, and specifically the way that people drive now, I don't know if it's necessarily an era thing or because the safety's so good. Obviously, there's been safety about this car and stuff, but all things considered, you look now and you look in the 1980s and it's slightly different. I just think that if that was the case, 9 times out of 10, we'd be ending these super speedway races under caution. Just because it would probably be somebody tries to make a move, they wreck, and they have to throw the caution. And then unless they try to red flag it and have these 1-lap shootouts and blah, 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 I just think it's way cleaner in terms of trying to have a good race finish to just do the overtime thing. And if you have it for all the other races, keep it consistent. For races like the Indy 500 and stuff, I don't like having it overtime because of that style of racing where it's a lot more dangerous if you have those kind of lap shootouts and stuff like that. I much prefer in that side of things if you keep it to the 500 miles and you try to red flag it and have these certain circumstances, because ending under caution is, I'd say, more unlikely in those circumstances because you don't have the same kind of pack racing where it's so common to see those late wrecks and stuff. Obviously, it does happen in IndyCar. We've seen it plenty of times where there's a late caution that mixes things up or makes things difficult. But I'd say overall on the NASCAR side of things, I much prefer having the overtime and try to have that green flag finish instead of just kind of accepting that most of the time is going to be a caution.
Yeah, I am 100% on your side on this, because if anybody who should be biased towards getting rid of the overtime rule, it should be me. But I'm for the overtime. I think it adds a bit of spice to it. It makes you make decisions that clearly have a huge impact on whether you win a race or not. It's not complete until you take the white flag and then the checkered flag. I think if you end races under caution more frequently, it takes away those kind of monumental finishes that we've seen throughout NASCAR history at super speedways of making the last move. When do you make the move? Like, I think that takes that element out. It would definitely spice up the lull period that we sometimes see in the final 5 laps or so with drivers waiting till the last lap. There's an argument to be made for that. But then if they spin out anyways, coming with 2 to go, then the race is over. Then you're like, well, what the heck? Like, we just sat around watching them run single file for 15 laps and then end under caution. It's been the guy that's leading the whole time. No, that's not what the fans would probably want to see either. So I don't know if either fan will be necessarily happy if you look at one way or the other, but I think overtime is beneficial because it just, even though it's 500 miles and, you know, it is meant to be that length, there is a lot that can be said towards just what that final 2-lap sprint or final lap sprint could be. I mean, you saw it. You basically take the white flag and that's could be the race as well. So there's a lot of mind games that can go on with the possibility of overtime, that if we didn't have that element to it, that would, I think the final laps that would be taken away. But nonetheless, I think overtime has provided a lot more beneficial stuff. It may tear up some more cars. Maybe the owner side is like, damn, like I think whatever happened there that brought out a caution that ended the race, that's it. Like we don't have to tear up any more stuff and we get to bring the car home in one piece and ride around for 2 laps. I think that could be definitely an owner's perspective on trying to save some money and not trying to wreck up their stuff. And for drivers as well, they're like, I don't want to put myself at risk. But it's the Daytona 500. I feel like any driver that you're not Kyle Busch in that situation, you're loving it. Like you want that extra shot to potentially, I mean, we've seen guys come from like 10th, 12th on restarts. Stenhouse was what, like 8th or 10th on the restart before that. And he got to the lead by the back straightaway. Like it was pretty incredible stuff to watch, just how quickly it can change in just a half a lap. And yeah, it was tough to watch, but nonetheless, I think it was still entertaining for any fan that objectively wanted to see a good finish of the Daytona 500. So I personally don't see the argument of it going to, no overtime, because I think that would be kind of a lame way. You don't get like that crazy finish. You get the drivers rolling around for 2 laps, 3 laps, however long. And then it's such an anticlimactic call to I think it's a big part of it too, the broadcast, like the call to the finish, like that is such a great, from a fan's perspective at home, you want to see that crazy, Mike Joy, Larry McReynolds, Darrell Waltrip, 2007 Daytona 500 call that is just out of your mind crazy. And if you have the opportunity to have no overtime, I mean, what do you say? Like, and Kyle Busch wins the Daytona 500. Like it's a
little bit funny you say that, because the most iconic Daytona 500 moment did happen under caution like that in the 98.
It's true. It's true. But I feel like you're coming to the white flag and they're still kind of going at speed there for a bit.
I would say overall, the overtime stuff is on the right side of the entertainment versus sport discussion, where it's more entertaining for the fans. It gives the competitors another chance. It doesn't just allow things to end. It gives them, you have to go out and win the race. You don't just have it, quote unquote, handed to you if you're leading, which I don't love using that terminology, but that's kind of how it goes. And yeah, I'd say overall, there's lots of different stuff you can argue about the entertainment stuff, but I think overtime's on the right side of it.
Good debate, Kyle. I enjoyed that. That was a good conversation. But Daytona is now in the past. Well, let's move on to something even more sad than Kyle Busch losing the Daytona 500. It's Auto Club Speedway.
Oh, man. Tough week for you, eh? Holy smokes.
I am losing it over here. Like, I mean, for people that have listened to the show for a long time, or if you're new here, I'll give you a little context. My first NASCAR race that I ever attended was back in 2008 at Auto Club Speedway. Kyle Busch won the Nationwide Series race on Saturday night. Jimmy Johnson and his Jimmy Johnson Foundation paint scheme won on Sunday evening. And that was a lot of fun. I mean, I'll never forget that. It's obviously going to be a sentimental track towards me or anybody who's experienced going to that track. I think it's an awesome facility. Yeah, it's definitely not as high tech, I think. I mean, I haven't been there in a long time, but I'm sure it hasn't updated too much, given
if they're tearing it down, clearly it's
given the situation that they're tearing it down. But I remember back when I was staying in the hotel there, NASCAR drivers stayed in that hotel. Like it was like I met David Reagan at breakfast. I met Kurt Busch at breakfast. I met Jamie McMurray. Like it was just all.
It was the worst.
It was all encompassing there that I
Don't
met.
dodge it.
Like,
Don't dodge it. Who was the worst?
Who was the worst? What?
In your interactions with them, who was the worst? Or were they all good?
They were all. I was giddy, man.
Like I mean, like
I got autographs from all of them.
Nice. Okay.
So I didn't have any bad experience because my mom's like, go say hi, and you're like, I don't know. I don't want to bother them, or like, you're too scared. Right. But
that's awesome.
I mean, it was such an awesome day. It was so hot there at that time of year too, in August. Like it was ridiculously warm when they had that late summer race. And I mean, there's some pictures of me, man, where I am like on pit road and totally out of it. Like I've got a washcloth around my neck and like totally not even like trying to smile for pictures. I'm trying to be as happy as I can, but I'm like dying from heat stroke. But it was a great race, and I'll never forget that was the first time. I would love to have gone back there this weekend just to close it out and say goodbye to it, but I'll do that from my TV set here in Toronto instead. So
I was going to say, couldn't put that on the TSN tab?
No, not unfortunately. I would have done that in my own pocket just to take the weekend off to go watch that race, because I think it's just I think especially last year when you look at how good that race was, I think people now are like, oh man, it's going after this year because it was just it was one of the races of the year last year. It was number 2 on the calendar. Like I don't think anybody expected that going into Auto Club. It's had some great finishes, and of course when it was a little newer pavement, it wasn't the greatest racing, a lot of single file around the bottom, but once it started to age, that top line came in and it's become a really, really great racetrack. Of course, the field gets spread out, but
I'd say it got caught in like the worst time possible for an aging intermediate track where anytime you have a new pave, it's going to have its rough moments where you got to kind of work through it until it can age and you get that real
Michigan's still in their repave rough moment.
Well,
10 years later.
Well, anyways, that was inevitable.
Parking lot.
But
BS.
once it kind of got to the point, pardon me, where it was that worn out multi-groove exciting racetrack, they changed the package to where it didn't work on that racetrack, where it was the neutered engines and it was so far apart and you can't really do anything because you're in the throttle all the time. There's minimal tire wear and all this stuff. And so you get those super dull races in the middle part. And then you have the new car come at the time when everyone's like, short tracks. We need more short tracks. Yeah. We need more short tracks. Look how great this racing product was. And at the time it was right. now it's not. Just one of those things where it's so difficult to get the right track at the right time with the right car and the right schedule and all this stuff, to where I feel like if we had this next generation car 3 years earlier, we'd be talking about Fontana being on the schedule in its current iteration for years to come. But instead, because it got kind of caught up when the groundswell came for short tracks, and the West Coast doesn't really have a short track they can go to, and it's a great spot to try and bring the great racing, and it just kind of caught at the wrong time. And now we've got this great intermediate car and a great track that's going away for a type of track that at the moment is probably the worst type of racing for this kind of car. So we'll see how things go in the future, if they can figure out how to get this car right on the short tracks, and maybe it turns out to be an awesome decision, and maybe you get some great racing at a short track there and you have a unique venue on the West Coast. But it's a tough one going into this weekend, knowing that the great 2 mile track is kind of going away, and you have Michigan there where it's just not the same. So it's a specific kind of venue where NASCAR only has 2 of the 2 mile ovals like this, and the best one's going away.
Yeah, it's tough. And I think everybody can agree that the best one is going here. I mean, Michigan sucks.
And even when it was first announced that it was going to a short track, everyone was like, I want more short tracks, but it also sucks that it has to be
expensive Auto Club.
Because it is, like I mentioned, one of
if it was a mile and a half, if you're tearing up Texas, I mean, I don't think anybody would be complaining, right? Yeah. But
I get it. It's just tough timing on everybody's part. We'll see how it goes. But certainly I'm still intrigued by the short track on the West Coast. I think that has a lot of promise, but we'll see how things play out.
Works. And especially for a paved short track, we don't really have anything recently repaved on the short track side of things for the Cup Series. So I think there will be some.
I'm less concerned about the pavement and more the car itself right now. But we'll
true. But I think there will be some growing pains for whatever this.
Yeah. Like if the car isn't great on the old tracks that are fantastic, like it has no hope on that kind of stuff. But we'll see how it all plays out.
It'll be a mix between Bristol and Martinsville, it seems, from the renderings or the sketches that we've seen. Yeah. But we'll see how much they get into that. They've sold the land for much of it. NASCAR, they announced it today when we're recording this, so it'll be a much smaller facility than what Auto Club Speedway is now, but you'd imagine that since it's a 2-mile track going down to about a half mile. So makes a lot of sense. But anyways,
also makes
Kyle,
you a lot of money to sell a bunch of land.
Yeah, I wonder where they're going to invest that. All right. Draft time. This is it. Auto Club Speedway's farewell. 10 picks. We did not get the top 10 finishers at Daytona right last week. Me especially.
That was a rough one.
But who had Ricky Stenhouse Jr. in their lineups? Even in fantasy, I bet you not many people did. I would be curious to know what the roster.
I'd be curious about the usage there. To recap,
give us a little summary.
Here,
yeah, what happened?
Yeah, I finished with 123 points. My best finisher being Joey Logano there with 42 points. AJ Allmendinger,
didn't win a stage, surprisingly. I was shocked.
Yeah, I was surprised that it was the finish that got a lot of the points and not the stage points.
Yeah.
AJ Allmendinger with the 34 points. Big runner up for me there.
Like he was for dead when he almost wrecked the whole field off a turn 2 as a lap
also,
car.
I get why people were upset with that, but also like he had to do that. So he had to beat Bubba Wallace was in the draft and he had to beat him. So I get why people are upset, especially the drivers, but I don't like, I'm glad the broadcast gave the context there because anyways, AJ with a nice little run there. I might have to reply to a certain comment from last week after that nice little run. Someone pumping your tires and maybe not as happy with my picks, but look how it went there. Anyways, on your side of things, less than ideal. I apologize. It's a tough one.
When they all get caught up in the same first wreck, it's pretty hard to avoid. Them hitting one another, of course. Like
one of them was in that wreck and still finished top 10.
Blaney's lucky, man. Oh my god!
A whopping 66 points for you, out of this one. Elliott with 1 point, Jones with 1 point. I told you to stay away from Jones. And
afterwards,
Blaney, I'm not going to tell you not to pick him before you make the pick.
He looked good before that, though. He was in that running.
Doesn't everybody? Hey, Ryan Preece got me a solid 9 points in a stage and then wrecked out. So there's that as well. But yeah, Ryan Blaney was your top finisher with 29 points and just a tough day overall. For the field, nearly doubled up on me with 205 points out of the guys.
I should have gone with Kyle Busch. I should have stuck with my gut. Even though that wouldn't have finished that well, because he still finished 19th. I keep on thinking he finished 4th, but he got wrecked.
Wishful thinking over there. Obviously, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. with the win, 48 points, the highest point total out of the day. Chris Buescher there with 43 points, a big day for him. Alex Bowman with 41 points, a bit surprisingly in the mix there. Ross Chastain with 38 points and Christopher Bell breaking the Daytona curse or whatever he had because it had been a lot of rough results for him at Daytona, finally getting a good run there with 35 points. But out of our draft picks, only one of them would have been in that top 5 overall point finishers, and that's Logano. So at least I took him with my first round pick. I'm happy with that, but everyone else we kind of
technically on paper, my pick doesn't look that bad. My first overall finishing 8th, but when you give the context on what he had to suffer through, that's pretty tough. Tough to poor Blaney, but we've got a draft to get to. You get the choice because you won.
I do.
So, do you want first overall or the 2-3 wrap?
I'll take first overall here.
Okay.
I'll take the first overall. We didn't do this draft last year, in this format, but last year in our personal fantasy, if my records are correct, and I'm not looking at the wrong year, which I did do a lot last year, I believe I won Auto Club last year, 161 to 140. I don't know if that's actually right.
I'm not surprised if that's the case because I think I had a lot of the Toyotas and they all had their engine problems. So
I don't know if the NASCAR app saves the year-to-year stuff. I don't think it does. I don't think we can go back and check. But anyways, that's what I have written down in my spreadsheet.
I think every time that I have a track that I really love and I think I have an idea, I lose. So this is going to be a rough weekend here again.
Every week, essentially. I'm kidding.
I don't love every track. You know that. That's
definitely. Alrighty. Shall we
win Pocono in Michigan?
Shall we get this draft underway?
Yeah, go for it.
Alrighty. First overall.
I wonder if it's going to be the guy that we picked out an average of like 1.3 last year in the playoffs.
Well, right now his average is undrafted because he didn't go in the opening draft of the year. We're going to make it a 5.5 average draft position because Kyle Larson is going first overall. Look, it's Kyle Larson, the defending winner at a track type that he has tied for the most wins in his career in the 2 mile ovals. He has 2 wins at Auto Club. The first one was kind of the more dominant victory where he had the pole, led over half the race.
Crushed
Last
the
year
field.
wasn't the same kind of race though, where they slowly built up over the day. They didn't lead their first laps until pretty far into the fourth quarter of the race. And then once they kind of grabbed the lead, there was no giving it up. There was a restart that he had to go back and grab the lead from, but of the final 33 laps, he led 28 of them, if a memory serves from the stats I collected. So clearly a guy that has the ability at this track type. Obviously, the multi-groove, the ability to run the wall, if that comes into play, obviously is directly in his wheelhouse as a dirt racer. And we've seen that show up in the results. He's got the 2 wins here. He also has 2 runner-up finishes at Fontana. One of the I wouldn't say big concerns, but one of the concerns with Larson here is that when he hasn't finished in the top 2, he has finished outside the top 10 entirely. So at Fontana, for him, it's been either
boom or bust,
basically win the race or not in the picture at all. And some of that is crashes and things like that. But overall, there's just too much upside in Kyle Larson at this track to not take him first overall. So Kyle Larson is my number 1 swing here.
Not a bad pick. I would have taken him too.
And that's why I took the first overall pick, because I didn't want you to have Larson. So
yeah,
sorry.
Yeah, that's fine.
I am scared of this 2-3 wrap though.
We're playing it like that, I see. Yeah.
You bet we are.
So for moi, it's so tough to draw on last year because the cars developed so much and the teams have gained so much knowledge. I'd be curious to know like what the ins and outs have been, like what they've learned specifically, because we never get that information. I'm sure there's a reason why we don't, but like there is a lot that is just developed throughout the last 365 days that I'd be curious to have a little bit more of an understanding on what teams feel like they've picked up on this car that they could have applied last year if they had known or what have you. But for me, second overall, I will be taking none other than Tyler Reddick. I think that he's going to be very, very fast this weekend. The 45 car was fast here last year. It's at spurts. He was the leading Toyota finisher with Kurt
Only
Busch.
top 10 Toyota.
And I think that I'm a little bit hesitant because I think it could take him a little while to learn a Toyota on this type of a track. Driving style wise, I think this fits Reddick. He was the fastest car here last year, and
wasn't even close on the laps led.
And I think he led 90, right? I think it was 90 laps.
And the next closest was Larson with 28. Like it wasn't even close for the laps led.
And then he wrecked out, obviously, with the flat tire. So that was unfortunate
we
for
can
him.
Ignore that part.
Yeah.
He's supposed to be pumping his tires right now.
Reddick was really good. Reddick was a fantastic. Surefire thing. So, but I do think that he'll be stronger this weekend. Yeah, exactly. That's as far. I'm watching the Xfinity Series race. So yeah, Reddick is going to be my guy here this weekend as my first pick, second overall in
team
the draft.
anchor, if you will.
Yeah, I'm building my team around him. And then the next guy I will be selecting, I don't want to give you a chance to pick him. I'm taking Kyle Busch to go out there. And
you would.
You know why I'm picking him this weekend? Because he's a man on a mission, as I've heard from people in around writing articles, if you will.
How badly did you want to use that?
I have been dying since I've read the article to say that on the show. From one trusted source, it seems like it's well known and well believed that he is a man on a mission, and coming so close the week prior, I think will motivate him even more. And the best part about it all is not that quote from Mr. Cushman's article previewing for drivers to watch out for this weekend. It is the fact that he is running with my name on the side and the hood of his car this weekend. Lucas Oil, I cannot let you pick him with my name on the car. So I don't care if it's spelt wrong. It's
what
not
would
the
you
same.
have done if I took him first overall?
I would have asked for a specific trade, and I'll give you 6 picks, and I'll take 4. Like I had to have him, but I didn't want to come out of the gates too flying here to take him with my first pick because I do like Reddick. But That 8 car was fast, and that's what he's in this year. And Kyle Busch has been very
last year at Fontana.
Very good at this track in his career. His first Cup win came here back in 06, so 05, sorry. I think that he'll be strong this weekend. I would die if I see that car doing donuts after the race, winning with my name on. That's why I want to be there even more, is seeing my name.
How quickly are you going to Photoshop the C into a K?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm going to be doing. As soon as the first picture comes out with him at practice, and there's a good shot of it, I'm posting a picture of him driving with my name on it, because I think it's a one-off deal with the sponsorship. I didn't see anything for other races, but I'm glad it'll be at this track with my name on it. My first race that I ever went to. Kyle Busch is the third overall pick, my second in the draft.
Yeah. Let me just say, if I took the 2-3 wrap, those would have been my 2 picks. So I need to talk with my supervisors to push my feature to Saturdays so you can stop stealing my guys. My number 4 pick. This is where it gets interesting, because I had those were the 3 top guys for me, and pretty clearly, because you have Larson, the defending winner, who has multiple wins at this track, multiple wins at this track type. You have Kyle Busch, who is 3rd all-time in average finish at this track behind Jimmy Johnson and Carl Edwards, going into the car that was literally the fastest last year at this race from Auto Racing Analytics. And then the guy that drove that number 8 to the fastest ranking last year, going into a Toyota that had a lot of speed at these intermediate tracks at the end of the season. So those were the 3 guys that I really liked this weekend. And then I think the field gets a little bit more interesting past that. But for me, I think there's still a clear number 4 guy, and that's Joey Logano for me. Over the past 6 races at Fontana, only one of them he's finished outside the top 5. And that was 2020 when he finished 12th. Since outside of that, he's got top 5 finishes at all of the last 6 races at Auto Club. And if you push it to the last 7 races, well, he finished 7th in 2015 as well. So that's a top 10 streak, if you look at it that way. Just really solid numbers overall. The 4 body changes, nose changes are intriguing on the bigger track types. We saw some of that pay dividends at Daytona. Well, I'm interested to see how that plays into kind of overall speed in certain cars and certain teams this weekend. But overall, looking over the last 3 races at Auto Club, 2020 and then 2020 and 2019, because of course we didn't race here in 2021. It's actually Joey Logano that has the best average points haul out of those 3 races, and that's without finishing top 10 in 2020. So overall, it's hard to ignore the stats on the Joey Logano side of things as probably the favorite out of the Ford stable. Number 5 is where it gets really tricky for me, because I think there is a clear top 3, a clear number 4 guy in that mix, who I don't know will maybe go out and win the race, but is certainly in that mix for a top 5. Certainly,
he's going to have Auto Club on the car. He's got to perform well. He always runs it. So
give him a little bit extra horsepower for the sponsor race,
with a little bit of Lucas oil under the hood.
Hey,
even though it's Pennzoil, because he's sponsored by Pennzoil.
Oh man, it's impressive how quickly we go off the rails every single time we do this.
It's my fault. I'm sorry.
Next pick for me, I'm scared of what you're going to do for the 6-7.
Me too.
So I think I'm going to play it safe to a guy that might not go out and win the race, but I think is going to have a solid point stay, basically, regardless of how things go. And I'll take Kevin Harvick with my next pick here.
Bakersfield, ending it off for the final time in his home state.
3 straight top 10 runs, which is tied for the longest active top 10 streak for anybody here with his teammate Eric Almirola. And he has the better finishes over that stretch than Almirola, with a 4th place back in 2019. You can go back further, couple of runner-up finishes, stuff like that. Obviously, Kevin Harvick is going to have great kind of career results wherever you look, more so in the back half of his career than the first half of his career here at Auto Club. But I think overall, just having that consistent speed recently at Fontana is intriguing with the 3 straight top 10 runs. Again, like I mentioned with Logano, the Fords are intriguing to me with the nose changes and the top end speed and things like that. That we saw kind of play out a little bit at Daytona. Yeah. I'm intrigued to see what that means for top end speeds and stuff at Fontana coming up. But looking for this range of the draft, I'm looking more for the consistent points guys who I know can get me around 30 points, maybe a little bit more if they get a good stage finish in there, rather than maybe trying to shoot for somebody that is a bit more boom or bust. So I'll go Logano Harvick here for the 4-5 wrap.
Good picks. Good picks. I would have taken Logano if you would have somehow
Logano,
slid,
I think, was the obvious one, and then past that is where it gets really, really interesting for me. I know there's a lot of
I was a
like
tad
guys.
surprised on Harvick, I will say, but
Yeah,
I do think that makes some sense. For me, I'm in a really tough spot here because I think there's 4 drivers that I really want to take, but like obviously can only take 2 of them.
Mhm.
So my first selection here in the 6-7, I'm going to take Martin Truex Jr. I think he'll surprise some people here this weekend. After 2 rough years here, he hasn't finished in the top 10 the last 2 years here at Auto Club. But before that, he was very, very good. He had a good stint there where I feel like he was always in the mix, especially in the Furniture Row days. Like that was a car that was super, super fast here pretty consistently. I think with the new kind of outlook on the season here, I think James Small will have him a bit more revved up and ready to go here for Auto Club. And I think he'll be similar in terms of like what Kyle Busch is trying to accomplish this year and just a man on a mission. And as Kyle likes to say, and I think Truex will be.
Is that going to be our new shirt? Is that something 100%. We got to do? We got to put on a shirt?
Yeah.
Kyle Busch, man on a mission. Jeez.
Yeah. Yeah. So Truex will, he hasn't qualified well here as of late, but I'm hopeful that they could have a little bit more speed here for Toyota. I look at last year as kind of an anomaly for them because this is a track they've always been
anomaly kind of overall for Toyota. Yeah.
Super, super good here. This is in Toyota's backyard. They care about this race a lot in California. Feels like they always put a little bit of extra juice into it. They're always running up front apart from last season. And I think that they get back to a little bit more consistency here this year. So Truex will be the 3rd member of my roster this weekend. As for the 4th one, there's some good guys here that I would love to take. Love to take. For me, I think I'm going to... it's between 2 guys.
Can only take one.
I'll hope that this guy slips to me next, but I'll take Ryan Blaney here with the 4th member of my roster. Hasn't had the finishes to really back up his speed here, but he's led 55 laps in the last 2 races here. So he was fast last year before getting caught up in something. So I think that the 12 car will be fast. It seems like that's a team that I'm looking to hopefully ride a little bit this season. Last year was a down year. I'm trying kind of go similar thinking with what
down here in terms of the wins, but like very
consistency was
again.
Still very good.
Yeah.
But I think that he'll be able to execute and finish off some races a little bit better in 2023. And I think that starts here at Auto Club on Sunday. So Ryan Blaney will be the 4th guy for myself.
Good pick. I was really looking at Blaney for this next wrap where, he hasn't had the top 10 finish the last couple of times, but some solid stage points and some good numbers there, like you mentioned with the lap slide. The 8-9. This is always a tough one.
Yeah. Let's see if you go back because you didn't have this last week. Does your number 9 pick win the race?
I don't think so.
It clearly wasn't mine last week.
I don't think so. We'll see. Who was your 9 pick last time out?
I picked McDowell.
Ooh. did not go well for the 9 pick.
Good Lord.
Geez. The 8 pick, I feel pretty good about.
I'm scared that I left one guy here that I was really looking at.
I don't know who I'm going to go with for the 9 pick. The number 8 pick for me is going to be Chase Elliott here.
Okay.
Looking at last year, I think his overall numbers would look significantly different if he didn't accidentally get walled by his teammate who had a new spotter. I think it's as simple as that. We're talking about a guy that led 12 laps last year, was going to finish top 3, probably if he doesn't get walled there, maybe wins the race if he doesn't get walled there, but instead goes back, wrecks, whatever, finishes 26th. Looking outside of that, 2020, he finished 4th at Fontana. Previous to that, had a good start to his career at Auto Club with a 6th place finish and then 10th place. Mixed results in the middle there, but I think just because of how different his overall numbers would look if he had that strong top 5 run last year, I think he's a good value pick this late. I wouldn't have him as one of the favorites per se going into this weekend, but he's somebody that I think could really show up and maybe upset some of the more typical favorites from a statistical perspective. So I will go Chase Elliott for the number 8 pick. And the number 9 pick is where it gets tricky because for me, there's kind of 2 clear routes that you can go down. You can
talk us through it.
I am about to. Don't you worry. There's few things I love more than talking through my thought process while I try to figure out what the hell I'm going to do.
Yeah,
there's 2 ways that you can go.
If I do the same thing, quit stalling.
Yeah, because I like to get in your head, and it works every single time.
Yeah, I always lose.
Yeah, you do. There's 2 ways to go about this one. You go for the big name in the big car and Denny Hamlin, who has very strong results over the past handful of years outside of last year where Toyota had their issues, where previous to this 6th, 7th, 6th going into last year, a 3rd place back in 2016. This is a guy that, of course, with Toyota, Joe Gibbs Racing, if they have the typical Toyota speed we saw at the end of last year, well, I mean, yeah, of course, why wouldn't you take them even earlier than this? Or you can go to a guy who's shown an ability to have really strong runs at this racetrack, and that's Eric Jones. Somebody that led 18 laps last year, was, I think, the surprise guy. Even though Reddick was out there in front, I think Jones was specifically the surprise guy last year, just because of the team being Petty GMS and being up there consistently all race long, qualifying second, running top 5 all day long. I think those are the 2 pretty clear picks for me, deciding between the 2. Ultimately, I am going to go Denny Hamlin here just because of the faith in the Toyota speed, and Denny Hamlin is a guy to go and get a result versus Eric Jones, who I really like at this racetrack. But if Petty GMS, less than them dropping off and more than other teams kind of figuring it out, if they play catch up, then we're talking about Jones, who has a really good day, finishing just inside the top 10, versus Denny Hamlin, who, if he has a good day, we're talking about a top 5 run. I just think the differential and upside there is too strong.
More risk pick to
in
Jones.
The favor of Denny Hamlin. Yeah. So I can't pass him up here and let him get to you for the final pick here. So I'll take Hamlin with the number 9 pick, and that's a legit contender to go out and continue the number 9 streak. So
yeah. I will say, if you didn't take him, I was taking him. That was the one guy I was deciding between. But I
think the bigger question is do you take the other guy I was talking about?
For moi, you know how much I love Eric Jones. You know, it's a guy we've certified as an official TGF guy. But I am a little wary, as you are.
Okay.
So I think he's a guy that will capitalize on other people's mistakes. He won't be the one that makes the mistake, but will it be good enough to get me enough points? I have slight doubt. I think he'll be good, but I don't think it'll be in that top 10-ish range that I'll need enough throughout the whole race. There is a guy that, if you may or may not remember, was very, very much in contention last year before a certain one of my picks ended up having a wreck with him. I'm going to be taking a swing on good old William Byron.
I like that swing.
I think this is a big year for him, and the numbers may not back up the selection per se, but I think that he led 17 laps last year, was right up in the top 5, I felt like, for most of that race, and then was in the wrong place at the wrong time with the Reddick's issue, and boom, they're both out of contention there. And that was obviously harsh luck for both of them. I think Byron's going to be fast this year, and Auto Club Speedway will be the first place that he can really show that. I like the value that I'm getting here at pick number 10 with him. I wouldn't have wanted to take him any higher than that, but when I look at the potential that he showed last year, I think there's room for it to even grow more. And I think Chevys and Hendrick specifically will show up with some pretty good speed here this weekend. So I think William Byron will be a good one. This is a track that I feel like is wide open for a lot of drivers to go out there and potentially get some good points. It's one of those races that you have your favorites, and then you have your guys that, like, yeah, on their given day, they can go up there and challenge for a top 5 or a top 10 and lead some laps. It all depends on how they want how it falls for them, but I think William Byron will be a strong contender on Sunday. So he rounds out my lineup.
Yeah. And for starters, I really, really like that swing. He's somebody that's led at least a lap in all of his races at this track. Hasn't had that finish yet. But like you mentioned, had that crash with Tyler Reddick there. And you said something that caught my attention there, where going against the numbers. I think it depends on what numbers you're looking at, because his career statistics, if you're looking at average finish, stuff like that, definitely somebody that is way down the list. And you're like, really, this guy, you're going to take a swing here. When they wrecked out, they were the second fastest car in that race. And in terms of overall speed in that race, Tyler Reddick in the number 8 was the fastest car in that race. Number 2, 0.016% off of that top end speed was William Byron there from Auto Racing Analytics. In the fourth quarter, it was Kyle Larson on top, followed by Joey Logano, 2 guys that obviously drafted very high for us because of that ability to go out and finish the race and adjust the car and get what you want out of it at the end. But in terms of young guys who were figuring it out and had bad, fast cars last year, Reddick, Byron were there. And so I really like that Byron swing where absolutely I could absolutely see him going out and leading the most laps and winning this race and kind of putting everybody on notice here.
Yeah, I hope so. Good Lord. I really would love a swing like that to really pay off for me. But I was looking at Chastain potentially as well, just based off of how well Trackhouse was finishing last year. But I don't know if this is necessarily the best track for him specifically. So that was just kind of a last minute look at. But I'll continue with my Byron guy that has let me down in some cases in these drafts, but also he could be a surprise person that people aren't giving enough attention to.
Yeah. And just talking about some of the guys that we maybe passed on, somebody that I wrote about this week for the Score that I thought was on an interesting statistical trend, less about the ability to go win the race, but more because of that really interesting trend that I came across was Eric Almirola, who I mentioned earlier with his teammate there. Kevin Harvick has the active longest top 10 streak at this track with 3, which is interesting to see because of some of the volatility here, that the active top 10 streak is only 3 races there. But for Eric Almirola there, every single year since 2016, he's improved his finishing position. In 2016, finished 21st, 2017, 19th, 2018, he finished 12th, and then the top 10 start rolling in. 9th in 2019, 8th in 2020, and then last year, despite some troubles in qualifying practice and stuff, started 31st, ended up finishing 6th in that race. I think it's going to be pretty tough for him to have a top 5 run to continue that trend over.
He must be most upset that this place is getting torn down because he's finally got the hang of it after so many years.
Should have wrecked Bowman in the race that he won so that it isn't getting torn down because of the Bowman curse. But no, that's a little trend that I'm interested to see continue because his career numbers aren't that great. He has just 3 top 10s at this track, but they come in the last 3 races here. So I'm interested to see how Almirola does this weekend.
Alrighty, winner pick time. Let's do it. Xfinity first. Who are you thinking?
So Custer's the defending winner here, right? This is the race he won in that 07? Yeah. Ooh, that's tough to bet against. That's real tough to bet against. Do you want a first pick for Xfinity or for Cup?
You get to pick because you won the draft, so I don't care.
Okay, you take first pick for Xfinity.
Okay, I'll take Cole Custer.
You would. I thought you were going to go against the basic pick.
No, man, he's going to be so good this weekend.
I'll take John Hunter Nemechek.
Okay, good pick.
Little Joe Gibbs there.
All right.
There's a couple Cup guys in the field this weekend, right? And like some mediocre cars.
It really picks up at Vegas and Phoenix. That's when the Cup guys come out.
The 10 car, the DGM, something like that.
I really wish Kyle was running this weekend, but God, for not.
Anyways, Cup picks. I get the first pick here.
Yeah,
I'm so happy to do this to you. I'm taking Kyle Busch for the win. I'm kidding. I feel bad. I'm gonna rescind that pick.
You can't do that to me.
I'm rescinding the pick because I feel bad about it. I will say that Tyler Reddick gets redemption and gets the win.
All right, I'm gonna take Kyle Busch, obviously, because he's got my name on his car. And I think he's got a legit chance. So that would be pretty cool.
He's got a serious chance this weekend.
Man, what I wouldn't give to add a race win diecast over there with Lukas on it. Oh my God. But
you got to get that car regardless. right?
I hope it comes out. I've been checking Lionel Racing every single day and it's not there yet. So it better come out. I swear to God. That's why I need him to win the race, because they have to make it.
That's true. That's true.
So anyways, good episode here, Kyle.
Yeah,
Any
good
final
stuff.
thoughts to send Auto Club Speedway into the night forever?
Nothing too much. Just really excited for this weekend. I think we're going to get a couple of really solid races. I'm very interested to see how the Xfinity Series plays out with all the changes there. But yeah, I'm very excited for this weekend of racing.
Couldn't be more excited myself. Bittersweet. Gonna miss the Auto Club. We will hopefully see one last final hurrah and good race here in Southern California. But make sure to follow us on Instagram at The Green Flag, and then make sure to follow us on TikTok as well. And subscribe to the YouTube channel. Leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it. We'd really, really appreciate it. But for this episode, I've been Lukas Wacker. He's been Kyle Cushman. Signing off for now. Hope you enjoy Auto Club Speedway's final race, and we'll talk to you to preview Vegas next week, everybody.